Okay, so once again, good day everyone. So our topic for today is about the employment, work employment rather, no? So it covers the work employment as I mentioned, no? So again, the nature and meaning of work need to be taken into account when developing employment policies and practices. So the aim of this discussion is to provide the basic information required to do this, and this comprises the nature and significance of work for people, the factors that affect how work takes place within our organization, in changes in pattern of employment, and the future work. So another thing that we may cover with this is the employment relationship, of course, which is one of that is to establish whenever employers and employees work together. So a positive employment relationship is required, and one in which there is trust and mutuality. So the state that exists, then statement and employees are interdependent and both benefits from this interdependency. So such a relationship provides a foundation for employment and employee relations policies, including the development of climate of mutual trust. Okay. Then it governs much of what organizations need to be aware of in developing and applying human resource management and employee relations process, policies, and procedures. This need to be considered, no, in terms of what they will or will not contribute to furthering a productive and rewarding rewarding relationship between all the parties concerned. So this discussion describes the employment relationship and how it will manage and how or climate trust can be created. So theories about the relationship are summarized in this lesson, of course. Then another thing, of course, is the discussions of the psychological contract. No? So the psychological contract underpins the employment relationship. On this lesson defines the psychological contract, explain its significance, and describe how it is changing. Okay, so to discuss with us the details about the topic, let us welcome our first presenter. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Nakikita na po yung screen ko po, sir.
Yes,
Sorry po, nawawala po yung... Okay, so our topic for today, good afternoon, classmates. So our topic for today is about the work and employment. So this was discussed briefly by Sir kanina. Okay. And now we will discuss what's the meaning of work and how it is different to employment. So first, work is any activity performed by persons of any sex and age to produce goods or to provide services for use by others or for own use. It is anything that requires effort. While employment, it is any activity to produce goods or provide services for pay or profit. It is anything you can get paid for doing. So, yung work, parang that's the yung mas malaki, mas ina-encompass niya kasama yung employment. Kasi yung work, masabi natin na kahit anong type ng trabaho, masabi natin yun na work or any activity that produce goods or services, yun yung sinasabing work. While yung employment, merong activity katulad din sa work, may activity pero you are being paid for doing it. So work and employment may be used indistinctly in everyday language. Pero sa labor market, they mean the different things. So katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, employment is a very specific form of work, while yung work, yun yung general term. Other forms of work include own-use production work, volunteer work, and even unpaid training. So next is the employment relationship. So what is employment relationship? It is a legal link between employers and employees. It exists when a person performs work or services under certain conditions in return for remuneration. And there's reciprocal rights and obligations are created between the employee and the employer. So initially, the relationship is founded on a legal contract. So kaya siya employment relationship. Sa first nilagay ko dito, it's a legal link. So what's the link between that? Yun yung kontrata. So this may be a written contract, but the absence of that contract does not mean that no contractual relationship exists. So employers and employees still have certain implied legal rights and obligations. So the employer's obligations include, syempre, di ba, kapag katulad tayo, lahat tayo nag-work, di ba? So karamihan siguro sa atin are employees. Tapos meron tayong employer. So yung employer, may certain obligation sila na dapat nilang gawin for the employees that is under the employment relationship. So katulad ng pagbibigay ng sahod, pagpo-provide ng safe na workplace, or being in good faith towards the employee and not to
Guys, pakiluto nyo muna yung manok doon. May klase na ako ulit. Oh. Ay, nagpiprito ako doon. Ay, sorry. Sorry po.
Ayan, so let's continue. So, undermine the trust and confidence of the employment relationship. On the other side naman, yung mga empleyado, meron din tayong obligations na kailangan gawin. Katulad niyan, we need to work kasi nababayaran tayo. At dapat maging loyal tayo sa company natin, or kung ano yung nakasaad dun sa kontrata, kailangan natin gawin yun. So, nagkakaroon ng reciprocal rights and obligations between the employee and the employer. So, it depends kung napag-usapan, syempre merong mga napag-usapan at meron din yung mga implied na rights and obligations. Katulad nung being loyal to your company, syempre that's implied na kailangang maging mabuti tayong employee sa ating employer. At yung employer naman, in return, magbibigay din sila ng yung good training sa atin, good remuneration at and benefits for the employees. So what are the types of the employment relationship? So first is the employer-employee relationship. So it exists where the person for whom the services are performed reserves the right to control not only the end to be achieved, but also the means to be used in reaching such end. So based sa mga na-research ko, actually dalawa lang siya. So parang dinagdag tong pangatlo. So ang pinaka-normal or usual na naririnig natin yung employer-employee relationship. So under sa employer-employee relationship, syempre merong employer, may employee, may kontrata. At kapag naging empleyado ka, you are being regarded of entitlements. Meron kang mga employee grants, may mga benefits, mga ganon. So merong katulad ng mga benefits ng payment of workplace health and safety premiums, right to reasonable notice of termination or pay, remittance of appropriate health and income and taxes, and contributing to and remitting mga insurance, ganyan. Assuming liability for an employee's deliberate or negligent acts during employment. So kapag sa employer-employee relationship, parang yan yung pinaka-best actually sa tatlo. Bakit? Kasi parang specified ng maayos sa kung ano yung rights ng mga empleyado. While sa independent contractor naman, a principal employs a person who is not an employee of the principal. So normally, ito yung mga may agent, ganyan. Yung, di ba kapag sa employer-employee, hina-hire ka diretso as empleyado sa company. Samantalang yung independent contractor, may agent na mag-hire sa'yo. So parang katulad yung mga security guards, ganun, minsan may mga companies na sila yung magiging agent, sila yung mag-hire, tapos yung main na company, babayaran na lang yung agent. So, kung i-compare natin sa employer and employee relationship dito sa independent contractor, mas malaki yung benefits ng employer-employee relationship. So, they are not entitled, kapag independent contractor, they are not entitled to any of the benefits na nasabi ko kanina. Actually, they are only entitled to the notice of termination of their employment if their contract provides. So, karamihan dito sa mga independent contractor, medyo mahirap kasi, for example, kapag biglang may termination, ganun, dun lang sila nabibigyan ng notice. Pero yung other benefits na nakukuha ng regular na empleyado, hindi nila makukuha. For the dependent contractors naman, function similarly, parang independent contractors naman to. Pero this is not usually discussed sa mga books kasi nga, ayan. So, sa dependent contractor naman, it is not an employee but whom is still considered to be economically dependent on the company or the individual that they work for. So, dependent contractor status is not limited to any individuals. Any contracting entity can be found to be an dependent contractor. So, kapag dependent, the most important difference between yung dependent and independent contractors is that the courts have ruled that dependent contractors are still entitled to reasonable notice if their services are no longer going to be required by the company. So, parang sa tatlong to, ang pinakamababa talaga na parang compared sa mga benefits na nakuha is yung dependent contractor. Kaya minsan, mas magandang inaalam natin, kunyari kung tayo papasok sa isang company, kailangan inaalam natin kung ano ba yung type ng relationship ang pinipirmahan natin. Will it be an employer-employee relationship? Will it be an independent contractor or dependent contractor? Kasi dito, dito natin makikita kung hanggang saan yung benefits na makukuha natin as an employee ng isang kumpanya. So there are also types of employment relationship contracts. So first is the transactional contracts, formal contracts that have well-described terms of exchange between employer and employees which are expressed financially. While yung relational contracts naman, largely informal contracts with more abstract terms and refer to an open-ended membership of the organization. And lastly, psychological contracts, set of unwritten expectations that exist between individual and employees and their employers. So dito sa transactional contracts, normally ito yung nakikita sa nakasulat sa mismong kontrata. And these are well-described terms. So nakasaad talaga kung ano yung, kunyari kapag nag-hire, sinasabi kung ano dapat yung work na gagawin mo for our company, ano ang remuneration mo, anong magiging benefits mo. While in relational contracts, ito yung mga informal terms na parang sure na kailangan mong gawin as an employee at as an employer. While yung psychological contract naman, ito yung unwritten expectations. Ito yung na-expect ng bawat isa na gawin nila. Kunyari ng employer, anong ina-expect na gawin ng empleyado mo sa'yo. And on the other hand, kung ano yung ina-expect na empleyado na gawin ng mga employers nila. So we will discuss yung psychological contract. So yung psychological contract, it is an unwritten agreement tulad ng sinabi ko that exists between employers and employees. It identifies each party's mutual expectations. It concerned with assumptions, expectations, promises, and mutual organization. So ang difference nito dun sa transactional contract is implied lang siya. Hindi siya nakikita sa pinirmahan na kontrata. So hindi rin siya nasusulat or kung saan-saan. Hindi rin natin pwedeng ma-photocopy, ganun, kasi unwritten siya. So, for example nito is yung management will treat the employees fairly. Di ba? Sure yun, implied yun na dapat ang management o ang employer will treat the employees fairly at magbibigay sila ng satisfactory work conditions. So normally, hindi to nilalagay sa kontrata. Di ba kapag sa mga contract, normally ang nakikita natin yung mga days ng leave, kung ano yung work na ipoprovide mo sa company, kung magkano yung sahod, at kung ano yung mga benefits. Pero yung kunyari, yung sasabihin na kailangang bigyan ng management ng magandang working environment, that's an implied contract. So masasabi natin na psychological contract siya. So employers, on the other hand, are expected to respond by demonstrating a good attitude, following directions, and showing loyalty to the organization. So on the other hand naman, mga empleyado, hindi naman sinasabi clearly minsan sa kontrata na dapat maging mabuting empleyado ka, dapat magpakita ka ng good attitude, kailangan mong sumunod sa sinasabi ng employer mo. That's implied already. Na kapag empleyado ka, kailangan mong sumunod sa boss mo, parang ganon. And you should be loyal to your company. So sa old contract, yung dati, sabi dito, do your best and be loyal to us and we'll take care of your career. So, di ba, ina-expect ng management na ganito, gawin mo yung best mo, maging loyal ka sa amin, tapos kung maging mabuti kang empleyado, kami nang bahala sa career mo. But the new contract is this: do your best for us and be loyal to us for as long as you're here, and we'll provide you with the developmental opportunities you'll need to move on and have a successful career. So, ngayon naman, ang pinapakita nito is yung kapag maging loyal ka sa company, they will do everything to train you at mag-move to the next level at maging successful sa career mo. So what are the types of psychological contracts? So first is transactional. So it is short-term exchanges of employment agreements about a specific performance term. So short-term exchange, so which means the agreements of the parties are just narrow and have a limited period of time, and it does not have training and other developments. So kapag transactional, saglitan lang siya. So hindi siya more on kung paano yung yung employee in the long run. So it supports the transactional psychological contract focuses on the economic terms and conditions in exchange of agreements. Sa balance naman, long-term siya. So kapag balance psychological contract, dito tinitingnan ng employer yung continuous na training and enhancing ng work ng employees long-term, yung long-term outside the company. So parang ang focus ng empleyado dito, ng employer dito is magtatagal tong employee na to. So anong dapat na gagawin? So they will ensure that you will undergo the certain trainings para magtagal ka sa company. They will ensure na you were remunerated well in order that you will stay and will not move to other companies. While in relational psychological contract naman, long-term exchange and employment agreements and non-specific terms. So dito naman yung employer will committed to offer a stable wage and long-term employment and support well-being and interests of employee. At hindi lang yung employee, kundi pati yung family nila. So kapag relational psychological contract, it focuses on the social exchange and economic terms and condition of exchange agreements of the parties. And lastly is the transitional short-term exchange without specific performance terms. So makikita natin dito na parang the difference are between kung short-term ba siya or long-term ba siya, kung may specific na terms ba na nakasaad sa contract or hindi specific yung contract. So in transitional psychological contract, it presents no commitment so from either party. So wala silang short-term lang siya. So parang dahil short-term lang, wala din specific na performance term. So walang commitment. So actually, yung iba, sinasabi nila na they do not constitute a true psychological contract. Kasi di ba kapag psychological contract, implied na meron ka sanang gagawin for the other party. Pero dito kasi parang no commitment at all. So yun lang for today. Thank you.
translation?
Yes po, sir.
Okay, so the most people work to earn a living, right? But they also work because of the other satisfaction it brings, such as doing something worthwhile, so a sense of achievement, prestige, recognition, the opportunity to use and develop abilities, and the scope to exercise power and companionship. Now, the essential components of work, of course, work produces or achieves something. No, it is not an end in itself. So work involves a degree of obligations or necessity. Work involves effort and persistence. Work remains a central interest in the lives of most people. So the nature of work alters as organization change in response to new demands and environmental pressures. So the notion of the flexible firm and the lean organizations are particularly significant. So futurologists have predicted various fundamental changes, paradigm shifts, no, in the nature of work. But of course, some comment is complexity, unevenness, and the enduring features in the structure and relations of employment are crowded out by vision or universal paradigm. Now, the basic of the employment relationship. An undertaking by an employee to provide skill and effort to the employer in return for which the employer provides the employee with a salary or a wage. So the employee with the salary or a wage, no, the employer's obligations also include the duty to provide a safe workplace, to act in a good faith towards the employee and not to act in such a way to undermine the trust and confidence of the employment relationship. So the employee has corresponding obligations which include obedience, competence, honesty, and loyalty. So we have, of course, three types of employment relationship contracts: the transactional, relational, and psychological. Now, the dynamic and open nebulous nature of the employment relationship and the multiplicity of the factors that influence the contract increase the difficulty of managing it. So, a high trust organization exists when management is honest with people, keeps its word, no, yung delivers the deal, and practices that it preaches. No? The trust is created and maintained by managerial behavior and by the development of better mutual understanding of expectations. So employers, employees, and employees of employers. So the theories explaining the employment relationships are labor process theory, agency theory, and exchange theory. Then, the psychological contract is a set of unwritten expectations that exist, no, between individual employees and their employers. It is a system of beliefs that encompasses the action employees believe are expected of them and what response they expect in return from their employer. And reciprocally, the actions employers believe are expected of them and what response they expect in return from their employees. So the aspect of employment relationship covered by the psychological contract will include from the employee's point of view. So how they are treated in terms of fairness, equity, and consistency, the security of employment, the scope of to demonstrate competence, of course, career expectation, and the opportunity to develop skills, involvement and influence, and trust in the management organizations to keep their promises. From the employer's point of view, the psychological contract covers aspect of the employment relationship as competence, effort, compliance, commitment, and of course, loyalty. No? The core of the psychological contract can be measured in terms of fairness of treatment, trust, and the extent to which the explicit deal or contract is perceived to be delivered. So a psychological contract creates emotions and attitudes that form in control behavior. So the nature of the psychological contract is changing in many organizations in response to changes in their external and internal environment. Let's say, for example, there is more focus on mutuality, a variable employment relationship, and loyalty. So Psychological contracts are not developed by means of a single transaction. They evolve over time and can be multifaceted. No? So there are some steps to develop a positive psychological contract. Number one, define expectations during recruitment and induction programs. Communicate and agree expectations as part of the continuing dialogue that is implicit in good performance management practices. Of course, adopt a policy of transparency on company policies, procedures, and on management proposal decisions as they affect people. And generally treat people as stakeholders, relying on consensus and cooperation rather than control and coercion. So I think that's